Valley. And the Haitian forces came out and they started singing the Marseillaise. The perfect exposition of universal values, liberty, equality, fraternity. And the French didn't know what to make of this. This was totally unexpected. And the French were defeated.
It's nice just a little bit just to add to that, but there was a Polish regiment that joined Napoleon's army, joined the French Revolutionary armies to fight for national independence of Poland. And they came over, they were sent over to Saint-Domingue as well to be part of this expedition. They arrived, heard things like the Haitian army singing Marseillaise and Sarah, all these things, and basically realised what was going on, realised they were not part of any kind of national liberation struggle here, they were part of recolonising. Switched sides. So the Polish regiment come over and fight on the side of the Haitians. It's a fantastic story because it's very inspiring. And after the because there's a lot of stuff about how Dessalines, who quoted that final bit about trampling the white underfoot and stuff, and how he was a racist, and he was saying, you know, we drive the Frenchmen into the sea and stuff. Well, you know, actually he recognised, he welcomed, he honoured this Polish regiment himself, Dessalines, and actually they became honorary citizens of the new Haitian state. So there's actually a small Polish community still actually in Haiti as a result of Femmnist, which is actually kind of, it goes rather than just, you know, it's not portrayed as just a race war, black against white. Actually, it's a, you know, it's a kind of sort of universal emancipation.
I mean, as far as the slave owners and holders go, in the book, CLR James is very clear to mention that when the French and the English and the Americans address each other, they're not addressing each other as a nation, they're addressing each other as white people with a common interest. So kind of nationality kind of broke down. That's when they were fighting for the different sections of interest that they could get. But when it came to freedom in regards to black people, their common colour was the strength. And also Napoleon, a bit that I read there, mentioned the Congo, and I think that's, I put Haiti and the Congo in a similar character. If we can repair Haiti, and if we can repair the Congo, then we'll have come a long way. And those two nations need our attention. Haiti was the richest island in the Caribbean, and Congo is still the richest country in the world, because of its minerals. But because of the politics, which is the same as what Toussaint Louverture had to put up with, because of special interests, because of the resources involved, the richest nations have the poorest people. And we just have to sit here and accept that, which is actually unacceptable, because the people are suffering, they're encouraged to abuse each other, and under such an impoverished situation. And there's no way that you can't tell me that the resources in the Congo can't pay for health and education to the people rather than going out to shareholders around the world.
That contrast, that comparison of Congo and Haiti is so important. Haiti's problems today come from the way in which Europe and America punish those people for daring to throw on slavery. And for decades upon decades they ensured that Haiti remained poor, and that has continued right up to the United Nations intervention. It's like spreading cholera there without that there. And then if you look at the Congo, that I would trace the roots of the modern kind of disappointments of what's happened in post-colonial Black Africa to the way in which the CIA, America, the Belgians got rid of Patrice Lumumba, who was the hope of a socialist Africa. You know, so it's kind of, we've got a couple of 100 years of imperialism that we're still fighting against.
And like, well, they replaced Lumumba with Mobutu, puppet terrorists acting on behalf of the imperialists. So they'll always find someone to go up against any light opponent.
Well, I mean, in the early 60s, everyone knows who have any idea about politics and economics and exploitation. But up to now, and sometimes when I think of the Congo, my heart bleeds. You know? Because in the 63, when Lumumba became leader, and they had the fighting in there, and the United Nations sent in Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations. You asked them, who killed him? It wasn't the people in the Congo. It's a system that has Joe upset. I mean, you look, the Belgium, the Portuguese, look at the copper, and all the, you could look week by week if you watch the right program. You see the problems in there. And 2013, you wonder what the hell going on, that the people's existence doesn't even worth it. And you know, the big countries going in, the Europeans have their hand in. It's just, for me, when I look at these, it's very, very painful.
Aimé Césaire, Season in the Congo, a fine play that was put on earlier this year in London. I was lucky enough to catch it. So it was kind of really, really brilliant sort of imperialist play about Lumumba, about his own invention of hero. Césaire.
The thing is that I sincerely would like to pray for Fidel Castro, because they went in and trying to help the Congo, but the size of the Congo, they couldn't manage. I mean, you know, when the Che Guevara and some of the generals went across the river, the Tanganyika River, and went into the Congo, and when they realized they just couldn't do anything. I mean, if you got a river in the Congo that's 4,500 kilometers long from here to the Caribbean. You know what I mean? But when they went in the Congo and they realized they couldn't do anything, that is when they moved over to Guinea-Bissau. You know what I mean? It's people want to spend some time and they say, we will find excuse for every damn thing, right? But we need to look more of human suffering in the world. 2013, that every day you will see it. If you want to look at some of the African channels, you see them every day, and you wonder, you know, where time has gone. There's no end in sight. I mean, I only pray and hope, you know.
I think today it's about representation, and I think that's the good thing about this book, is that it puts CLR James back on the front page, and it's about Africans telling their own story and the importance of that. Because even today, you think we live in more enlightened times. You can't think of a big black actor playing a black role written by a black writer. It's a shame that that's still the case today. So I write plays, not because I'm a writer, but because it's important that these roles are seen. It's important that people know that Frederick Douglass came to Leeds. It's important for people to know that one of the greatest Victorian circus proprietors, who was black, is buried in Leeds. There are all these stories, but it's to do with representation and misrepresentation. If we're not representing ourselves, then the misrepresentation of the past continues. And that is highlighted by a frieze, a stone frieze on Park Road, number 18 Park Road, a stone frieze designed by the artist Joseph Hewis, which was put up in 1904, has the world in trade with each other. And so everybody's represented standing there, apart from the little boy. And the Negro, who is stooped over a bed of coffee. Now in the city, that is the sole representation of black people. And until that's challenged, we won't understand what real representation is in this city. It'll just keep perpetuating, and the expectation levels are kept low. We have to challenge that image because we live with it and we don't even see it. But number 18 Park Road, above the blue arrow-aged job edges, and to rub salt in the wound, they've just cleaned it and added lights.
I think the thing about representation is incredibly important.
Very
In my memory of reading The Black Jacobins 25 years ago, I remember getting a copy of it thinking it'll take me forever to read it. I couldn't put it down and it was done in a weekend and I just wished it was longer. It's such a fantastic book. But my memory of reading James was that at the beginning where he says, I am sick of reading about blacks as victims. You know, this is about the importance of blacks as agents of change to transform the world. And where James talks about black history, there's a brilliant lecture that I think he did to the black families in the States in the 60s, where he says, you know, to understand Beethoven, you have to understand the French Revolution. To understand the French Revolution, you have to understand the Slave Revolt in Haiti. To understand that, you have to understand Toussaint. So that link between, you know, the supposed icons of European culture, and he brings them all together in total history. And it's a magnificent piece of work. And I mean, we should all really welcome Christian finding this bloody thing and digging it out and putting it back on the agenda again, that we can talk about Toussaint and James, because it's an incredibly important, you know, the world at the moment, it's incredibly easy to be pessimistic, you know, looking at the world. And what this is an image of, however shit our lives are, however precarious our lives are, it ain't as bad as being, you know, Toussaint in Saint-Domingue in the 1780s and whatever. And they fought and won. But if they can, we can.
Just a really quick point just on this about representation. I mean, one of the things that Paul advises on in my trying to do is Paul Rosen came to Leeds at the Odeon Theatre, what's now Primark, along with lots of other really, you know, Hugh Clinton, Ella Fitzgerald. It's about, you know, along with Beach Boys, but Count Basie. Amazing way of people came and performed them in the late 50s, early 60s, into the 70s, I think. And there's no plaque or anything up there in marking, you know, this. So one thing I think we might try and do is put pressure on Leeds Civic Trust or whatever, try and get a sort of plaque of just, you know, making sure that people want to,
follow at the side of the old French building with that list of performances.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested. I went to the Louvre and I looked at the list of sponsors, life members, which there's a few ironies there, isn't there? Being built on the blood of slaves, and it's just. I think I bumped into you on Woodhouse Lane, and you told me the Pablo Franca story, and I still think there are, and I know you've got extensive knowledge of the influence of black history on Leeds. I think there's loads of research that's around that needs to be done on this. Simply because I think today I read about some massive archive that the government's hidden, that they've just discovered, that's got like huge amounts of imperial documents that will itemise some of the real horrors of the British Empire. There's that. But there's also that, was it a couple of years ago where they looked at the compensation in slavery, and what would be very interesting, get a few plaques to these bastards who've got enormous amounts of money in compensation. You know, never mind the civic trust, let's have a bit more of a radical history of Leeds, you know, like this firm. And just to finish, a mate of mine just got a job with Chapeltown, you know, one of the big firms,
And in his training, he's doing something to do with the banking business. He had a list of firms, countries he couldn't do any transactions because of sanctions. And it was like North Korea, Syria, Zimbabwe, and Cuba. Right? Can you still believe that Cuba is still on the sanction list? Or, you know, why? Because of Castro upset the apple cart. And, you know, these stories continue, don't they? What would be great is to have a sort of scheme of history for local kids that illustrate, you know, not just the black experience in Leeds, but the working class experience in Leeds as well, because they're intertwined massively.
I think that's an interesting point there, because Yorkshire is famous for its satanic mills, but you don't see anything or read, it's not in the popular, it's what made Yorkshire, but it's not talked about. There are no identifiable stories. And I think until Yorkshire can talk about its own history, it makes other history difficult to attach onto. So if we could talk about the satanic mills, then we could talk about the wool products, you know, the shoddy material that was being used to make slave cloth in Batley. You know, so, but if you're not talking about the industrial history, it's hard to attach the other histories onto it. So maybe that's their genius.
James' relationship to this manuscript in relation to, I think you said he rewrote it later on. So could you just say a bit about what grasp that?
So this is written 1924, so it's very much a sort of vindicatory and really political anti-colonialist kind of onwards and upwards. You heard the ending of the play, it was kind of, you know, even though Toussaint himself, sort of tragic heroes dead, we're going to go and fight on. So it ends on this kind of rousing battle cry. But by the 1960s, you had the victory of various national liberation struggles. We heard about Eric Williams and Trinidad and stuff. And James is this, you know, after initial optimism around those regimes, by the 60s it was starting to set in, but in some cases not much had changed despite independence. So James couldn't just, from the 60s, he wanted to kind of retell the story, to point to some of the some of the sort of history from below and stuff, emphasising more, if you like, some of the more rank and file leaders of the slave rebellion, less so much on the Toussaint and Dessalines, the great sort of leaders, trying to complicate things a bit more and actually show some of the problems. Well, I think one of the reasons why the play itself wasn't really performed again, this version, Paul Robeson really wanted to, but the reviews are collected in here. Generally speaking, reviews are quite positive overall. They point to certain limitations perhaps in what James is doing, but they all praise Robeson. And Paul Robeson himself said to James, look, we can go on a run with this, you know what I mean? I'll play Toussaint, you can play Dessalines, and we'll swap over. So it's really nice sort of idea about what could happen. But I think partly, for me, get into the sort of history of the 20th century left on some level, but the divisions between sort of orthodox communism and Trotskyism, James was leading Trotskyist, Robeson increasingly pro-Soviet Union. After Stalin's terror, any kind of collaboration between Robeson and James was just being impossible. So however much, unfortunately, but you know, if Robeson wanted to put it on, I think he'd had a problem because of his because of James and who James is as a Trotskyist. I think that's part of it. It's a bit complicated and messy, but I think that's part of why this wasn't put on again. James did try, and when he went to America in 1938, he tried to stage it there, he had hopes of staging it, in America. He also got interested, he wrote there's a letter inviting to Haitian embassy in London when he returns from America in 1953, comes back to London, and he's looking around for what to do. And he writes the Haitian embassy in London and says maybe we could get it performed in Haiti or something like that. He still clearly had that script there with him. I think just gradually over time, after that, James was he just moved around such a lot in his life, and he was very, not careless, but he kind of would leave things. He was very generous, if you like. He'd leave whole collections and stuff with friends and stuff. So he gave various copies of scripts to just various friends. And they do eventually materialise in archives, but it just takes time, and I think it got kind of lost along the way.
That's wonderful. Because the book is on sale at the back for £12. Christian will sign copies. Considerably cheaper
if you want to.
This is a very prestigious publisher, very expensive.